Did you know that every great theme park attraction starts with a story? Ask an Imagineer, that's what they'll say. But why? And if stories are the key to a great attraction, then why is writing so difficult and how do we make it better? To solve this dilemma, I got a novel idea. Let's talk to a show writer. So I caught up with senior attraction show writer Emma Oliver at IAAPA. She's been involved in some amazing theme park projects, from Disney Live Entertainment to VR virtual roller coasters at Universal Studios Japan. Now, it took me 10 years to learn what she's going to discuss in 20 minutes. With that in mind, here are 11 amazing show writing tips that will transform your thinking. This is Controlled Chaos, a show where we talk about how theme parks are created from first rendering to rope drop and beyond.
I'll start from the beginning. I got my start working with some museums up in Newport News, Virginia. I worked with the Mariners Museum as well as the Virginia Living Museum, doing some marketing for them. And then once I graduated from school, I knew I wanted to work for Disney at least once. So I headed on down to Orlando, Florida to do the Disney College program, where I was a Jungle Cruise skipper. So for 6 months, I drove boats and told jokes. And then as I was wrapping up, I was looking to what was next. And they just so happened to have the show writer internship open with Disney Live Entertainment. And so like many of us, I didn't realize up until that point that somebody was behind all those shows in the parks that I loved so much. And so I went in, I met Allison Moran, the show writer there, and I just loved the energy. And so I ended up getting the internship and doing that for about 6 months. And then there was no going back after that. I knew I wanted to be a creative writer, and there weren't that many places to do it. And then to find a place as incredible as Disney and themed entertainment and theme parks, I just knew I'd found my place. So that was my start, live entertainment. I ended up going back to school to get my master's degree in dramatic writing. And then the rest is history. I got my master's in dramatic writing from the Savannah College of Art and Design.
Oh, SCAD, okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So you actually run into a lot of show writers from Savannah College.
Now, did you have any themed entertainment training at SCAD, or how did that work back when you went?
Yeah, so it was a lot of scripts and screenplays. So we did study stagecraft, we studied film and television, and we had already had a lot of dramatic writers come out of that program and into show writing roles. And so while there wasn't necessarily a way to study it, we did have that wonderful mentorship coming out of that program. So from SCAD, I went out to Japan, where I worked at Universal Studios out there. I was working in seasonal entertainment, so I did do some more live entertainment, but also our seasonal attractions there. We cranked out a whole bunch of virtual reality roller coasters, as well as cinema 4D experiences. So I really got to run the gamut of the different experiences that I could write for.
Okay, so talk about what a seasonal attraction is.
Yes.
Compared to like permanent attraction, I guess.
Yeah. So something I love about Universal Studios Japan is that it's what we consider a clubhouse park, where there's a lot of annual pass holders, and they're really looking for something new to come back for. And so there were a lot of festivals. We had summer festivals, we had Christmas holidays, there were even Halloween events. And so we were cranking out attractions for each of those. And so within the time frame of, say, 8 months, you had a new virtual reality coaster overlay. There's an existing coaster at Universal Studios Japan called Space Fantasy. It's an original IP, and with that push for established...
And this is a real roller coaster?
Yes,
okay.
It is, yeah. It's Guardians of the Galaxy reminds me of it here in Orlando, Florida.
All right, so we'll think about Guardians, all right?
Yeah, and so with that push towards popular, established TV and film-based IPs, what we do is we take a lot of anime and create that into an overlay for this coaster. And so we know the track that we're working with, we know all those rises and falls that we've got, and then we write to this coaster.
You put some sort of equipment into this to make it virtual reality?
So they've attached VR headsets to each of these cars. And so traditionally this is a spinning coaster where they actually have 2 seats facing forward and 2 seats facing back. And for the virtual reality coaster, we use those 2 seats facing forward, and we have those virtual reality headsets attached to it.
Now, this one got my curiosity piqued because as a pilot, I understand that whenever your body senses something different than what your eyes are seeing, that's when you get motion sick or seasick. If you think about it, when you're on a roller coaster, well, Your body feels the roller coaster, but if your eyes are seeing the VR headset, then how do you deal with that and how do you avoid motion sickness as designers? Well, it turns out they have a very interesting solution.
You'd always have the occasional story, but for the most part, we were always writing to having leading indicators in that media. You know, what's in front of you that you can keep your focus on that will keep you from getting sick. So you always have a guide character or something else that's in front of you the whole time that you can keep that focus on, and it leads you through the story as well.
So it's great to know that even the show writers are thinking about motion sickness. I thought that was fantastic. And that really led me to my next question, which was how do you write for a foreign audience? That seems incredibly difficult. How do you make them care and how do you make them relate? Well, it turns out they had an approach to it that seemed to work really well.
We got to write in English, and then we had an incredible translation team. And so our writing team was divided into two, super collaborative. And so we had our English writers and our Japanese writers, and we would each take lead on different things, and then we would cross-translate. And so a lot of what we did went into Japanese, of course, and then we'd have a lot of copy and stuff that would then come back into English so that non-local visitors could understand everything.
Yeah. There's got to be some challenges with that because, obviously an American reference would be completely lost on a foreign audience.
Yeah.
If someone said, don't go there, how do you translate that? I guess you could, if you did it literally, it would be completely wrong.
Yeah. I think some of the fun aspects of that were getting to explain different parts of our culture so that we could better understand each other and the story that we were trying to tell. And so at some point I remember describing an experience as like homecoming or a homecoming football game. And then I had to explain to my Japanese counterparts what was a homecoming football game and what is the feel of that.
They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I think IP or intellectual property is worth even more than that. We all know the emotions we feel when we step into a world we've seen in the movies for the very first time. But what happens if you've never seen the movie and you don't know the IP? Well, Emma has a great approach, and I think you'll see how.
We like to start from a point of accessibility. And so even if we do have a known IP, we want to make sure that it's an experience that can be enjoyed by everybody, whether you've seen every single episode of this show or you barely know the characters. And so we always start with story at its core and then introduce only the aspects that you need to know for this particular story.
Okay.
And so if you are a huge super fan, you get the fun Easter eggs and references and things that might appear in the background. But if you're there and you're meeting these characters for the first time, you have just as much fun.
When it comes to accessibility, how do you approach that? As a show writer, as a professional designer, what do you look for? What do you do?
Yeah. So I look at it a bunch of different ways. I want to make sure that an attraction is accessible to everyone in the way that everybody can experience it. I want everybody to understand it as well. And so something that was super important, like particularly at a place like Universal Studios Japan, where you have audiences that speak so many different languages, we want it to be visually understandable. And so even if the entire attraction is just in Japanese, we want to make sure that we're telling that story in a variety of ways so that no matter what language you speak, whether you're hard of hearing, whether you're visually impaired, like everyone has an opportunity to understand, experience, and enjoy that story. And then I also like to push my teams to consider the other accessibility elements that may not necessarily be as influenced by story. Like ADA ramps. Are there only stairs to access this attraction? Is everybody able to use the equipment and elements like that?
Yeah. I want to shift gears here because this has been something that's been on my mind, that we as Imagineers and Universal creative people always say it all starts with a story. Yeah? And you're a show writer. And I believed this for a long time, and then I realized that there's folks on YouTube that are better storytellers than we are. If you think about it, so there's a guy named Mr. Beast, that you may have heard of him, but he's got like 300 million followers because he's a very good storyteller.
Yeah.
And I realized that there's a whole science behind good storytelling. And there's a really telling clip from an NYU film school with the South Park creator guys. I want you to kind of talk to me about this possibly, or at least lend your thoughts, where, the South Park people said, if you say this happens, and then this happens, and then this happened, that's boring, right? But if you say, I'm walking through the forest, and then I saw an alien, and then I ran away. That's boring. I was walking through the forest, but I saw an alien, so I ran away.
Yes.
So I just changed 2 words in there, same story,
Yeah.
but one is fun and interesting and one is boring.
Well, so in that case, it's all about causality. And so I love that, there's an inciting incident for these stories that is the thing that launches the entire experience. And so, one, you're there for a reason, you have a guest role, and then something happens that changes your trajectory, and then you're sent on this experience. And so really looking at how one thing leads to another rather than a series of events happening almost sporadically.
So can you give me an example of that?
Ooh.
Yeah, I'll put the pressure on.
Yeah. Well, I love that in Guardians of the Galaxy here in Orlando, Florida.
Which I haven't seen, so you
Oh,
can
really?
make up whatever you want on this.
All right.
Yeah.
So you come in and you're a visitor to the Wonders of Xandar. So this is an exhibit that you're coming to.
Okay.
And as part of this exhibit, they're going to transport you up to their ship. And that is when the villain appears. So they need to call the Guardians of the Galaxy.
So the villain changes your trajectory,
Yes.
so you call the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought for a minute I was going to stump her by talking about Mr. Beast and the South Park creators on their storytelling techniques, but she nailed it, and she clearly understands not just what they're doing, but also how to use those same techniques to write for attractions. I was impressed. But she wasn't done yet, because then she talked about how to hook her audience in, and it's worth noting.
Well, so there's a variety of guest roles that I like to draw from. There's always the visitor, the spectator, trainee is a super popular one. I like to choose ones that fit in story, and so say like on Rise of the Resistance, you're all rebels. So something that fits the IP that is easily graspable, and I think that's everybody's entry point. Once you're given a guest role, you know exactly what you're supposed to do, and that really helps you to better engage with the experience.
Right. And if Kylo Ren walks in and says, "You're all my prisoner now,"
Yes.
you kind of get that.
Yeah.
And I feel like they communicate that very well,
Yes.
that you're a prisoner. And so you kind of get it, and then when the person rescues you, come this way,
Yeah.
then that's really easy. One of the things I see, because we do a lot of student projects, is they'll set up these obscure races or clans of people, the purple clan, the green one, and
Yes.
they want this, and this is their culture, and this is, so you're trying to explain to somebody these brand new foreign cultures and then make them care about this
Yeah.
concept that they don't. And so how do you approach that
Yeah.
as a design? I mean, maybe we just talked about it, but
Yeah. Well, I like to give guests a shortcut to understanding. I call this the access point, the point of accessibility. And so give them something familiar that they recognize and they can latch onto. And so when I think of like walking into the Magic Kingdom, one of the things you grasp onto is that like Americana atmosphere. And you get that vibe that you're in the 1920s and you recognize this area. And so you kind of understand the role you're going to play within it.
Yeah.
And so even if you do have these complicated stories of these clans that are clashing, by giving them a point of reference that they can latch onto, something that aligns with their existence and their understanding, you can then bounce off of that to tell that larger story.
interesting. What are some other things that you do or tricks that you've learned along the way as a show writer that helped you? Either what a mentor told you or something that just works, that you found that works,
Yeah.
that maybe you could help share that would make someone else better.
Well, I love starting an experience, the development of an experience, by thinking about the audience and who that is and who I'm writing towards. And I really love narrowing in on who that is because I think that universality comes from specificity. And so something that I love to reference is like Sesame Street was made for a very specific audience. It was made for a very, very specific group of kids in New York, and the world loves that intellectual property. And so I love just taking my audience, knowing them inside and out, and then creating something specifically for them, and everybody else will come after.
Yeah.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I asked her next about demographics. How does she know them so that she knows that she's writing for the right audience? And I think it's worth noting.
Yeah, so there's a little bit bit of both. When you're working for an organization as large as Universal Studios Japan, you're typically given your demographics. So these are the majority of the people that come to the park, and these are the people who we want to cater our entertainment to. If you're working with a smaller company, a smaller organization, they may not necessarily know their demographic as much, may not have done that research yet. And so I'm doing that research myself, looking into who might come to this type of attraction, who might enjoy it most, and who might I be writing to.
Yeah, and I think you can almost walk around the park and almost know or understand, but maybe there's some misconceptions too. If you go to Epcot, it's a larger crowd, it's a more culturally diverse crowd. If you go to Magic Kingdom, a lot more families with children.
Yeah.
So I feel like knowing who your market will help.
Yes, and knowing those intellectual properties and their audiences helps as well. And so if you are writing for Encanto, you know that you're definitely writing for families, you're definitely writing for younger children, and that you might have a cutoff too. It's like children will play up, like two older siblings, but very rarely does someone play down. And so you want to make sure that it's something that the parents will enjoy, that the older siblings will enjoy, the young kids will enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a different audience than, say, those that are riding the Guardians of the Galaxy coaster.
Well, I hope you're paying attention because this is where we get into the different kinds of scripts that an attraction show writer will write. But it's important to remember that when we're writing for immersive attractions. We're trying to immerse you in the environment and stimulate all five senses, not just the obvious ones of seeing and hearing. Yes, even taste, although that usually goes along with smell most of the time.
Yeah, so when I first got into creative writing, I really wanted to write books and novels, the kinds that I got lost in as a kid. I always write from a first-person perspective. And so I'm thinking about what my character is thinking, what my character is feeling, seeing, smelling, touching, tasting. And so that kind of mindset has really smoothly lent itself into writing for multisensory experiences.
Because in a park attraction, you have to think about all of those things.
Yes.
Right.
And when you do think about all of those things, it makes that experience all the better. And so if you have 2 touch points, you can have a great experience. But if you have 5 touch points, then you have a super experience.
Right. This comes from Adam Berger, and maybe you do the same thing he does. I don't know if this is standard across, but he would do the high concept, tell the attraction in a sentence. It's your elevator pitch, right? There's what he called, at least, the guest experience narrative.
Yes.
Which is where you do exactly that, which is you take somebody through the attraction and then basically describe what they see, smell, hear, touch, experience.
Yes. So right from the entry point to the attraction or experience, you talk about everything that they're going to think, feel, smell, do, all the way through the end of the experience. And so this is typically done in a linear fashion, whether or not the experience itself is linear, just so you can get the sense of what is the arc that I'm going to go through? What are the emotions I'll experience during this? And so we'll get a really cohesive idea of that guest experience that our teams can then use to build out the scenic, the sound design, the music, and all elements.
Could you talk about what, so you have to write, the narrative, which is, at the beginning, it's like, well, wait, how can I write an emotion? But you have to figure out as a show writer how to capture that. Yeah. But what other scripts do you have to write, or do you typically get to write, I should say, as part of your job?
Yeah, so depending on the type of project, I could be writing a design narrative, say for a Christmas overlay. And so this will be a description of the scenic as based on story. So say the Minions are decorating for Christmas, how might they do it in a way that is distinctly Minions? And then another aspect is, of course, a script. If you do have whether characters talking or overhead audio narration, that's another element. And another one of my favorites, just because I studied so much of scripting and how to get the dialogue concise enough that everyone can understand it, but snappy enough that you keep that story moving. And so you can live an entire hero's journey in 5 minutes or less.
Do you find that you actually try to do a hero's journey? Because I think the hero's journey is incredibly compelling as a storytelling plot device. I'm not sure what you call it, but an overarching archetype, that's wrong too. basically they're elements of every story in the hero's story. The good stories all have every element of the hero's journey.
Yes.
So can you do that in a theme park attraction concisely? Is my question.
So I think the hero's journey is an excellent basis, and I was always taught that once you have expertise in, once you've mastered the medium, you can then rake it in ways that are going to resonate with your audience. And oftentimes the divergence from that basis, that hero's journey, is what adds greater significance to the experience.
I feel like we always do need a mentor. Okay, kids, you're going to buckle up your seatbelts, and when the alien comes, shoot them. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's an excellent access point for an attraction.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
I just wanted to thank you for meeting with us today. This has been a wonderful interview.
This is great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nate.